Imagine it's 2019. You're a fisherman in Nuuk, the capital of Greenland. Population 19,000. Your family has lived here for generations. The water is cold, the work is hard, but the ice is reliable. It always has been. Then one morning, you turn on the news and learn that the President of the United States has offered to buy your home. Not a house. Your entire country. The Danish government, which has sovereignty over Greenland, calls the offer absurd. The world laughs. Pundits treat it as a joke, another erratic headline from an unpredictable administration. But you're not laughing, because you've noticed something. For the past 5 years, strangers have been arriving. Chinese geologists, American military contractors, European mining executives. They're not tourists. They're not here for the northern lights. They're drilling, they're mapping, they're measuring. And now you understand why. They're not interested in Greenland as it is. They're interested in what Greenland is becoming. This is not a story about politics. This is not about one president's ego or another country's ambitions. This is about ice. This is about minerals. This is about the mathematics of resource scarcity. And once you understand the math, you'll understand why every major power on Earth has turned its attention to a frozen island most people couldn't find on a map. This isn't theory, it's documented geology, it's climate science, it's defense strategy. And what's happening in Greenland right now will determine who controls the 21st century. To most observers, Greenland is a footnote, a quirky news item, an autonomous territory of Denmark with a population smaller than most American suburbs. When the idea of purchasing Greenland surfaced, it was treated as absurd. Late-night comedians made jokes. Diplomats issued polite dismissals. The story faded within weeks. Even now, when geopolitical analysts discuss Arctic competition, Greenland rarely takes center stage. The focus is usually on Russia's northern sea route, or China's polar Silk Road, or melting ice caps as an environmental tragedy. Greenland is seen as a passive actor, a frozen afterthought, a place where nothing happens and nothing will happen. This is exactly what makes it so valuable. The most strategic assets are always the ones nobody's paying attention to, until it's too late. Here's what the geology tells us. Greenland sits on one of the largest untapped mineral deposits on Earth. Beneath its ice sheet, which covers 80% of the island, lie reserves that read like a shopping list for the 21st century economy. Rare earth elements, uranium, zinc, iron ore, lead, gold, copper, molybdenum, lithium. Let those sink in for a moment. Rare earth elements are essential for manufacturing electric vehicles, wind turbines, smartphones, missile guidance systems, and fighter jets. Currently, China controls approximately 60% of global rare earth mining and 90% of processing capacity. Uranium powers nuclear reactors and nuclear weapons. Greenland's Kvanefjeld deposit is estimated to contain one of the world's largest uranium reserves. Lithium is the backbone of battery technology. Every electric vehicle, every grid storage system, every device in your pocket depends on it. Greenland has all of these, in quantities that, according to geological surveys, could rival or exceed known global reserves. But here's the constraint that matters. For most of human history, these resources were inaccessible. They were buried under 2 miles of ice. They were locked in permafrost. The cost of extraction exceeded any possible return. That equation is changing, not slowly, rapidly. Greenland is losing approximately 270 billion metric tons of ice per year. That number has tripled since the 1990s. The ice sheet is collapsing faster than any climate model predicted, even a decade ago. What was locked is unlocking. And every superpower on Earth understands what that means. To understand why Greenland matters, you have to understand a problem that no politician wants to talk about honestly. The green energy transition requires minerals, not abstract minerals, specific minerals, in specific quantities. And those quantities are staggering. A single electric vehicle requires approximately 6 times more mineral input than a conventional car. An offshore wind turbine requires 13 times more minerals than a natural gas plant of equivalent capacity. According to the International Energy Agency, meeting global climate targets will require a 600% increase in mineral inputs to the energy sector by 2040. Where do those minerals come from? Right now, the answer is mostly China. China dominates the rare earth supply chain. China has invested heavily in lithium extraction across South America and Africa. China processes the majority of the world's cobalt, graphite, and manganese. This creates a strategic dependency that Western governments are only beginning to understand. The United States imports approximately 80% of its rare earth compounds from China. Europe is similarly dependent. If geopolitical tensions escalate, if trade routes are disrupted, if tariffs are imposed, the entire green transition collapses. Electric vehicles don't get built, wind farms don't get constructed, defense systems don't get upgraded. This is not speculation. This is supply chain mathematics. And this is where Greenland enters the equation. Greenland offers the possibility of breaking that dependency. Not easily, not quickly, but definitively. Geological surveys suggest that Greenland's rare earth deposits could supply global demand for decades. The uranium reserves could fuel nuclear power plants across Europe and North America. The lithium could reshape the battery supply chain. But there's a catch. Greenland cannot develop these resources alone. It lacks the capital, it lacks the infrastructure, it lacks the technology. It needs a partner. And that partner will, by definition, gain enormous strategic leverage over the 21st century resource economy. This is what the competition is actually about, not buying an island for real estate value. Controlling the mineral backbone of the post-carbon economy. Let's examine how each major power is approaching this competition. Number 1, the United States. American interest in Greenland is not new. The United States has maintained Patuxent Space Base, formerly known as Thule Air Base, in northern Greenland since 1951. It is the northernmost U.S. military installation, critical for missile defense and Arctic surveillance. During the Cold War, Greenland was a strategic buffer against Soviet bombers and submarines. American B-52s could refuel there. Early warning radar systems could detect incoming missiles. The geography was everything. That geography has not changed. What has changed is the context. As Arctic ice retreats, new shipping lanes open. The Northern Sea Route, running along Russia's coast, already cuts weeks off shipping times between Asia and Europe. As that route becomes navigable year-round, the Arctic becomes a major transit corridor, and Greenland sits at the gateway. Control Greenland, and you control access to the North Atlantic. You monitor every ship passing between Asia, Europe, and North America's eastern seaboard. The 2019 purchase offer was clumsy, but the strategic logic behind it was not. Since then, the United States has moved more quietly but more effectively. In 2020, Washington reopened a consulate in Nuuk for the first time since 1953. It has signed agreements with Greenland on mineral extraction, technology cooperation, and infrastructure investment. American officials rarely discuss purchasing Greenland anymore. They don't need to. Economic integration achieves the same strategic objective with less diplomatic friction. Number 2, China. China's approach has been different. Where the United States relies on alliance structures and military presence, China offers capital. In 2016, a Chinese mining company attempted to purchase an abandoned naval base in Greenland. The deal would have given China a foothold on North Atlantic territory, directly adjacent to American early warning systems. Denmark blocked the sale under pressure from Washington. But China did not retreat. It adapted. Chinese investment has flowed into Greenland through indirect channels, mining exploration permits, infrastructure proposals, scientific research partnerships. A new embassy opened in Nuuk in 2022. China's interest is transparent, rare earth security. Beijing understands that its current dominance in rare earth processing is a wasting asset. As other nations develop alternative supply chains, China's leverage diminishes. Greenland offers a hedge. If China can secure extraction rights or even processing agreements, it maintains its position in the mineral economy. The strategy is patient, generational. It does not require ownership. It requires access. And access can be purchased one contract at a time. Number 3, Russia. Russia's position is more complex. It already dominates the Arctic militarily. Its northern fleet is the largest naval force operating in polar waters. Its icebreaker fleet exceeds that of all other nations combined. But Russia lacks what Greenland offers, a position in the North Atlantic. Russian access to global shipping lanes is constrained by geography. The Baltic Sea is essentially an enclosed body of water. The Black Sea is controlled by the Turkish Straits. The northern sea route is long and dangerous. Greenland would change the geometry of Russian naval power. A Russian presence there, even informally, would flank NATO's Atlantic defenses. This is why Russian diplomatic efforts have focused on undermining Greenlandic trust in Denmark and the United States. State media coverage emphasizes historical grievances. Indigenous rights are highlighted when convenient. The message is subtle. The West does not have your best interests at heart. Russia is not positioned to acquire Greenland directly, but it can complicate acquisition by others. In geopolitics, denial is often as valuable as possession. Number 4, Denmark. And then there is Denmark, the nominal sovereign. Denmark's position is increasingly untenable. It lacks the resources to develop Greenland's mineral wealth. It lacks the military capacity to defend Greenland against great power pressure. And it lacks the political will to either fully integrate Greenland or release it entirely. The result is paralysis. Denmark subsidizes Greenland's government to the tune of approximately 500 million euros per year. This represents roughly half of Greenland's public budget. Without Danish support, Greenland's economy collapses. But this dependency breeds resentment. Greenlandic independence movements are growing. Polls suggest that a majority of Greenlanders favor eventual sovereignty. And here is the trap. If Greenland becomes independent, it will need a new patron. It cannot survive economically without external support. The question is not whether Greenland will align with a great power. The question is which one. Denmark is not fighting for Greenland. Denmark is managing a transition it cannot control. None of this is new. In 1884, European powers met in Berlin to divide Africa among themselves. No Africans were invited. Borders were drawn based on resource access, strategic positioning, and colonial convenience. The justifications were civilizational, the mechanisms were economic, the outcomes were extractive. Africa possessed what industrial Europe needed: rubber, copper, diamonds, gold, agricultural land. Greenland possesses what the 21st century global economy needs: rare earths, uranium, lithium, strategic geography. The parallels are not exact. Greenland has a functioning government. Its population has legal rights. No one is proposing outright colonization, but the dynamic is the same. A small population sits on resources it cannot extract alone. Large powers compete for access. The terms of that access will be negotiated under profound asymmetries of power. During the scramble for Africa, local populations were offered protection, infrastructure, and civilization. What they received was extraction, displacement, and exploitation. In Greenland, local populations are being offered investment, jobs, and development. The question is what they will receive. History suggests the answer is rarely what was promised. Here is the mathematics that makes this situation irreversible. Greenland's ice sheet contains enough water to raise global sea levels by approximately 7 meters if it melted entirely. That complete melt is not imminent, but partial melt is accelerating beyond all projections. In 2012, 97% of the ice sheet's surface experienced melting. This was an event that climate models suggested should occur once every 150 years. In 2019, Greenland lost 532 billion tons of ice. This was the single largest annual loss in recorded history. In 2021, rain fell at the summit of the ice sheet for the first time in recorded history. These are not anomalies. They are indicators of a system crossing a threshold. Climate scientists refer to tipping points. A tipping point is a threshold beyond which a system's behavior changes irreversibly. The Greenland ice sheet may be approaching such a threshold. Once a certain amount of ice is lost, the remaining ice becomes structurally unstable. Surface melt accelerates. The ice sheet's own weight causes it to compress and flow toward the sea more rapidly. This is not a theory. This is observed physics. What does this mean for the resource competition? It means time is not on anyone's side. Every year, more mineral deposits become accessible. Every year, the window for establishing extraction agreements widens. Every year, the urgency of securing supply chains increases. Governments understand this even when they don't say it publicly. The Paris Agreement's climate targets assume a rapid transition away from fossil fuels. That transition requires minerals. Those minerals are increasingly accessible in Greenland. Climate change is not just creating the problem. Climate change is creating the prize. And the race to claim it is already underway. Let us be precise about who gains from this competition. First, the mining corporations. Greenland Minerals Limited, an Australian company with significant Chinese investment, holds exploration rights to the Kvanefjeld deposit. If extraction proceeds, it stands to profit enormously. Second, the military-industrial complexes. The Pentagon has already allocated funds for increased Arctic operations. Defense contractors are developing cold weather equipment, surveillance systems, and infrastructure for polar deployment. Third, the great powers themselves. Whoever secures dominant access to Greenland's resources gains leverage over the entire global energy transition. This is not merely economic advantage, it is strategic supremacy. Fourth, the intermediaries. Consultants, lawyers, lobbyists, and fixers who facilitate deals in small jurisdictions with limited regulatory capacity stand to extract significant fees. These are the beneficiaries. They are not theoretical, they are identifiable. Their interests are documented. Now let us examine who bears the cost. The indigenous Inuit population of Greenland numbers approximately 50,000. They have inhabited the island for over 4,000 years. Their culture, economy, and identity are tied to the land and sea. Large-scale mining transforms landscapes. It requires roads, ports, processing facilities, and worker housing. It brings outside labor, disrupts traditional hunting grounds, and alters community structures. In every resource extraction case throughout history, indigenous populations have borne disproportionate costs. Pollution affects local water and wildlife. Economic benefits flow outward. Social disruption remains. The promise is always the same: jobs, development, prosperity. The outcome is rarely what was promised. This is not cynicism. This is documented history. In Alaska, the Trans-Alaska Pipeline brought temporary employment but permanent environmental degradation. In Australia, uranium mining on Aboriginal lands created prosperity for corporations and poverty for communities. Greenland's population will be asked to accept similar trade-offs. Whether they have meaningful power to negotiate terms is the central question. The power asymmetry is stark. Greenland's entire GDP is approximately $3 billion. The rare earth market alone is projected to exceed $15 billion annually by 2030. The lithium market is growing even faster. When 50,000 people negotiate with entities whose annual revenues exceed their national economy by orders of magnitude, the negotiation is not between equals. This is the structure that produces exploitation, not evil intentions, structural asymmetry. Here is the constraint that makes the situation inescapable. Greenland cannot remain neutral. A neutral Greenland, rich in critical minerals and strategically located, is an invitation for great power competition. Each power has incentive to prevent rivals from gaining access. Each power has incentive to establish its own presence. Neutrality requires the capacity to defend that neutrality. Switzerland is neutral because it is mountainous, armed, and surrounded by powers that benefit from its neutrality. Greenland has none of these advantages. If Greenland aligns with the United States, it gains security but loses autonomy. American military bases expand. American corporations gain preferred access. Greenlandic sovereignty becomes nominal. If Greenland aligns with China, it gains capital but faces Western isolation. Investment flows in, sanctions may follow. Denmark's position becomes untenable. If Greenland pursues independence without great power alignment, it becomes a vacuum, and vacuums in strategic locations do not persist. The Cold War demonstrated this principle repeatedly. Non-aligned nations became battlegrounds precisely because they were non-aligned. Greenland faces the same logic. There is no exit from the competition. There are only choices about how to be positioned within it. Let us return to the fundamental constraints. Constraint 1. The global energy transition requires minerals that are currently controlled by adversarial powers. This creates an imperative to diversify supply chains. That imperative will not diminish, it will intensify. Constraint 2. Climate change is making Arctic resources accessible on a timeline measured in years, not decades. The window for establishing positions is now. Delay is strategic failure. Constraint 3. Small populations cannot resist great power pressure indefinitely. Greenland's negotiating leverage is temporary. Once extraction infrastructure is built, once contracts are signed, the balance of power shifts permanently toward the extractors. Constraint 4. Democracies struggle to plan beyond electoral cycles. Authoritarian systems can make generational investments. This asymmetry favors patience, and China has demonstrated more patience than any Western government. These constraints are not opinions. They are mathematical realities. They cannot be wished away, and they lead to a conclusion that no one wants to state directly. Greenland's future will not be decided by Greenlanders. It will be decided by the intersection of climate physics, resource economics, and great power competition. The only question is whether the outcome will be acknowledged honestly or dressed in the language of partnership and mutual benefit. History suggests the latter. The extractors always speak of partnership, until the extraction is complete. In the 19th century, the British and Russian empires competed for influence across Central Asia. Historians called it the Great Game. It was a competition for strategic positioning in territories that were nominally independent but practically subordinate. Local rulers were courted, subsidized, and occasionally deposed. Borders were drawn and redrawn. The populations caught between empires paid the highest price. The Arctic is becoming the 21st century's great game. The players are different. The technology is different. The resources at stake are different. But the structure is identical. Great powers competing for position. Small populations caught between them. Resources extracted under terms that benefit the extractors. Greenland is not unique in this regard. It is exemplary. What happens in Greenland will establish patterns that repeat across the Arctic, in Svalbard, in the Canadian archipelago, in Alaska's North Slope. The ice is retreating everywhere. The resources are becoming accessible everywhere. And the competition is intensifying everywhere. Greenland is simply the most visible theater of a global dynamic. Watch Greenland, and you see the future. There is one question that is rarely asked in discussions of Arctic resource competition. Should these resources be extracted at all? Greenland's ice sheet is a critical component of global climate stability. Its reflective surface bounces solar radiation back into space. Its cold mass moderates Atlantic currents. Its slow melt maintains sea level equilibrium. Mining at scale in Greenland requires infrastructure that accelerates local warming. Roads absorb heat, facilities release emissions. Dust from mining operations darkens ice surfaces, increasing absorption of solar energy. The very act of extracting the minerals needed for the green transition may accelerate the climate change that the green transition is meant to prevent. This is not a paradox. This is a trap. And it has no solution that reconciles short-term strategic imperatives with long-term planetary stability. Governments do not discuss this openly because there is no political constituency for restraint. There is no electoral advantage in suggesting that some resources should remain in the ground. And so the extraction will proceed, not because it is wise, because the incentive structure permits no alternative. Let me be clear about what I am not saying. I'm not predicting war over Greenland. I'm not predicting imminent annexation. I'm not predicting specific events or timelines. Prediction is not the purpose of this analysis. Pattern recognition is, and the patterns are clear. Resource competition over Greenland will intensify. External investment will increase. Greenlandic autonomy will erode in practice even as it is celebrated in rhetoric. Indigenous communities will be offered development. They will receive extraction. Environmental protections will be promised. They will be compromised. Great power rivalries will be managed diplomatically until they cannot be, and then they will be managed by other means. None of this requires conspiracy. It requires only the continuation of incentive structures that have operated for centuries. The specific outcomes are uncertain. The general trajectory is not. Greenland is not a future battleground. It is a present one. The consulates have opened. The military agreements have been signed. The mining permits have been issued. The competition is not approaching. It has arrived. And the populations most affected have the least influence over its outcome. This is the pattern that repeats across history. From the colonization of the Americas, to the partition of Africa, to the exploitation of the Middle East. Small populations, large resources, great powers. The outcome is never determined by the preferences of the small population. It is determined by the balance of power among the great ones. If you understand Greenland, you understand the 21st century. The century will be defined by resource competition over the materials required for energy transition. It will be defined by climate change, unlocking previously inaccessible territories. It will be defined by great power rivalry conducted through economic integration rather than military conquest. Greenland is the template. Every strategic dynamic that will shape the coming decades is visible there in concentrated form. The question is not whether these dynamics will play out. The question is whether anyone is paying attention. This is historical and educational analysis, not financial or investment advice. Return to that fisherman in Nook. He still goes out on the water. He still hauls in his catch. The ice is less reliable now, but the work continues. He sees the changes happening around him, the new buildings, the foreign faces, the helicopters heading inland toward deposits that will be worth more than his entire community's output for generations. He knows his grandchildren will live in a different Greenland. He does not know what that Greenland will look like, but he suspects it will not be designed for him. History rarely is. The patterns are already in motion. The ice is already melting. The minerals are already mapped. The question is not if the transformation will occur. The question is who will control it and who will pay the price. This channel exists to study these patterns before they complete. Most people see the headlines. Few understand the structures beneath them. If you found this analysis valuable, consider subscribing. The next autopsy is already being written.